there so many years ago over there at Old Elm Missionary Baptist Church, and I think it was the first time I saw you was maybe it was a youth rally.
Remember my sister used to play the piano and I played a little lap steel?
Yeah. I remember in the lap steel. He could play anything. How many instruments did you play?
At least 6.
6. All right. Well, Ezeckiel. We finished on Ezeckiel 33 last week. And let's go on from there. God tells us that God is going to bring Israel down. He's going to bring Jerusalem down. He's going to bring judgment upon them. Remember, they made an alliance with the Pharaoh of Egypt, and God said, I'm going to judge Egypt because of that. I'm going to bring them all down. God was using Nebuchadnezzar and all of these kings that he was sending against Jerusalem and Israel to bring judgment upon them because they had been ungodly. They had gone after other gods. Now in the 34th chapter of Ezekiel, we see something here that is, well, if it just stood out by itself in Ezekiel 34th chapter, it would be a great message and a great story. But Psalm 23 and John the 10th chapter, basically it says the same thing. So Psalm 23, Ezekiel 34, and John the 10th chapter. Now, remembering all of those three things, how many of you can recite Psalm 23? All right? All right, brother.
Pretty close.
All right. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. All right? And we go on from there. Now let's go and look here in Ezekiel the 34th chapter. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Now remember what Jesus said in John the 10th chapter? He said, I am the what? The good shepherd. I am the good shepherd. And he said, the hirelings, I love my sheep. I lay down my life for them. And they hear my voice, all of the same thing. And then Psalm 23. Psalm 23 was basically David's idea of heaven. Remember, David was your shepherd, wasn't he? Let's go back here in Psalm 23 and just look at that for a minute. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. All right, the Lord is my shepherd. Just look at that. The Lord, Jehovah, is the shepherd is the word roeh. And roeh means to shepherd, but it literally goes all the way back to the word to see, to watch after. Now, if you go back to Genesis, I want to show you this. When I was having that slight stroke here a while back, I wanted to get my mind off of my body, so I went in there and grabbed my Maryland test of this. I never got by Hebrew, and was looking at this, and I saw something that I never saw before. I couldn't believe it. Here I am, my head's spinning like a top. Everything, I can't even stand up and walk, and I got in there and I got to looking in the Hebrew, and I said, wow, this is really great. I just forgot about what was happening to me and just started looking at this. In Genesis, the 16th chapter, in verse number 3, it said, Abraham lived 10 years in the land of Canaan. Abraham's wife Sarah took Hagar, the Egyptian, her maid, and gave her to her husband, Abram, as his wife. And remember what Sarai means?
Yeah.
What does it mean? What's Sarai mean?
Hostile.
Hostile. That's what it means. Hostile, contentious, a warrior. Always ready to fight. That's what Sarai's name, Sarai, meant. Contentious, a warrior, okay? And he went into Hagar, and she conceived, and she saw that she had conceived, and her mistress was despised in her sight. All right? Sarah, now, the first place, Sarah just berated Abraham. God hates me. That's what she told him. God hates me, and Jehovah is mad at me, and he won't let me conceive. So, since God's mad at me, you take my handmaid and you go into her, and if he's really mad at me, she'll conceive and you'll have a baby, and it'll be my baby anyway because she's mine. Hateful.
Makes sense.
Sound like her, didn't it?
Yeah.
Bill, does it sound just like a woman?
It does.
Yeah, I knew what you were going to say, just like a woman.
I mean, we're totally confused, but
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Well, anyway, so then what happened? She conceived right off the bat, so Sarai is real mad now. She wants to kill that girl. And whichever way she looks, she gives her the evil eye. Just like that, boy. I mean, every time she sees her, and she takes off running. And Sarai said to Abraham, may the wrong be done to me upon you. And I gave my handmaid into your arms, but when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her sight, and may the Lord judge between you and me. Now she's mad. Now the Lord is really mad at me, she says. And he has despised me. And she's real mad. And Abram said to Sarah, behold, your maid is yours, and she's in your power, and do whatever you want to her. So she treated her real mean. Harshly, it says. It says she continued to treat her harshly. And she fled from her presence. And then the angel of Jehovah. The angel of Jehovah. Now, this little old girl. Now, I'm going to tell you something. This slave had no power over her life or what was done with her. She didn't have any choice to say to Abraham, go jump in the creek when he came to mate with her. And by the way, she was his wife. The act of marriage is when a man and a woman come together. So that is his wife. This girl is his wife. And the angel of the Lord found her by the spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, I am fleeing from the face of my mistress. Contentious. I'm going to tell you what, the Lord knew she was contentious. He said, I am fleeing from her face. That's what it says in the original language, El Panay, is her face, the Panay. I'm fleeing from her sight and from her face. Then the angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress. Submit yourself to her authority. And the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your descendants. Now he's promising this little Egyptian girl. He said, I'm going to greatly multiply your descendants because of Abraham. Because this is Abraham's child. That they shall be too many to count. And the angel of the Lord said to her further, behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son. Now God is going to name this child Ishmael. And what does Ishmael mean?
He hears God.
What?
He hears God.
God heard. God has heard. All right, he heard her prayer. And you shall call his name Ishmael, and God named him. And the Lord has given heed to your affliction. Now let's see what he's going to be. He's going to be a wild ass of a man, is what it says.
Wild donkey.
Wild donkey. Now, I tell you what, a wild donkey is wild. You can't hardly tame them at all. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him. Does that sound like the Middle East today?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That's what was going to happen. And he will live to the east of his brothers. And she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, Jehovah Roe, the Lord my shepherd. The one who sees after me. The one who sees after me, Roe. All right? I have remained alive, and I have seen Jehovah. All right, but Genesis 22. Go over to Genesis 22 real quick. Now here we have Abraham. God has called him to go to Mount Moriah, right over there. See that picture of Jerusalem right there? Right up on that mountain right over there. That was Moriah. That's where Abraham went. He's going there now. And he told him to go offer your son there. Go offer your son. I was working on this in Hebrew and Greek this morning. This is beautiful. And Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey, and I and the youngster, the young boy, my heir. It says in Greek, in the Septuagint, it says huios. Remember what huios means, Brother David? Huios is more than son. That's it right there, huios. That's kind of like it is in English right there. That means heir. That was the heir. Now, God told him to go offer your son. Now, already he's lost. Ishmael's gone, isn't he? Ishmael's gone. Now, he doesn't have Ishmael. He doesn't have Ishmael. And he wanted Ishmael to be his heir. But God said, Ishmael will not be your heir, but Isaac will be your heir. So he takes Isaac up there. And he says to them, stay here, his servants. By the way, these were guides. It said in Hebrew that they're guides, like professional guides. They were professional guides that he took along with us. And he takes them over there and he said, now stay down here below at the top, bottom of this mountain, because I and my son are going to go up yonder, and we're going to worship over there, first person plural, and we are going to return. He didn't say, I will return. He said, we are. So Abraham, and in the New Testament, it says that Abraham believed God, that he believed that if he went up there and killed that boy, that God was going to raise him from the dead. Because God had promised him that through this would be the heir. The heir. Not just the son. Now in the Septuagint it says your beloved, your only beloved son, agapete. Your beloved son. He loved him. And Abraham took the word of the burnt offering, the wood of the burnt offering, and laid it on Isaac, his son. Boy, look at there. Now here the sacrifice is going to carry the wood. It's going to burn him up. And Isaac spoke to Abraham and said, Father, Daddy. And he said, yes, son. Behold the fire and the wood. Now, in the fire back then, they used to carry, in a clay pot, they carried coals. Okay, so here's the coals to start the fire. Here's the wood. Here's the knife. But Daddy, where's the sacrifice? And he says, the Lord will see to the lamb for himself. He will see to it. That's what he said, he will see. That's the word roeh, or jireh, okay? And Abraham said, Jehovah Jireh will provide for himself. He will see to it, the lamb for the offering, my son. So the two of them walk together. That's the same term that God used to Hagar, that he used here, and the word is shepherd. All right? And then it says in verse number 11, and the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham, and he said, here I am. And he said, do not stretch out your hand against the lad and do nothing to him, for I know that you fear God, and you have not withheld your only beloved heir from me. And Abraham raised his eyes, and looked, and behold, a ram caught in the thicket by the horn. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering. And Abraham called the name of the place Jehovah Roeh. The Lord was seen. In Jesus in the New Testament, in John 8:56 through 58, the Jews, he told them that he said, before Abraham was, I am. And he said, you mean to tell me you're not yet 50 years old and you say, do you know Abraham? He said, Abraham was glad to see me. That's when he saw him. He saw Jesus right here in his pre-incarnate form. And what did they want to do to him after he said that? They wanted to kill him because he said he was God, the great I am. Jehovah Jireh. Now I'll go back over to Ezeckiel. Now these shepherds that's supposed to lay down their life for their sheep, these shepherds of Israel were not doing the job. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel, prophesy, so say to those shepherds, thus saith the Lord God, woe, shepherds of Israel, who have been feeding themselves. Should not the shepherds feed the flock? They've been feeding themselves. You know, I look back in history. We've been through, some of us have, been through a lot of years. We've seen a lot of things, a lot of water flow underneath the bridges.
Things we never thought we'd see.
We saw, remember that Jim Jones that took all those people down the Guyana?
One of my friends died in that.
That's a shepherd. He led the sheep astray, didn't he? He led the sheep astray. And not only that, but he called for all of those to kill themselves. And they killed themselves and their children. What was it, 900 and some odd people there died. And then we see Jimmy Baker. Now he's back on television again. Now, what was his crime? Everybody always remembers about his illicit sexual affairs and everything, okay? But what was his crime? Why did he go to jail?
He was taking too much money. He was ripping the people off.
He was a con artist. And he used God's people. And there he is out doing it again after he got out of jail. They should have just said, no more for you, fella. But he's out there doing the same thing again. You should have been feeding the flock. And you're feeding themselves. They remember the houses that he had for his dogs that had air conditioners in his dog houses and all this kind of stuff and all the money that he took all the people for. I wonder if you ever read Ezeckiel, the 34th chapter, and applies that home. You eat the fat and clothe yourselves with the wool. You slaughter the fat sheep without feeding the flock. Those who are sickly you have not strengthened, and the diseased you have not healed. The broken you have not bound up, and the scattered you have not brought back, nor have you sought for the lost. But with force and with severity you have dominated over them. John the 10th chapter. Let's go to John now. John the 10th chapter. You have to realize that when Jesus is teaching this, he's teaching the same bunch of people. The leaders of Israel is the ones he was denouncing back here in Ezekiel the 34th chapter. Now in John the 10th chapter, he's telling the same thing again. Truly I say to you, he who does not enter by the door to the fold of the sheep, but climbs over the other way, is a thief and a robber. Now, back in these days, out in the country, did you know back in these days that everybody lived in cities? There weren't any farmers. Did you know that? How many of you knew that? Anybody? They had cities. Let's call this Bethlehem. It's a walled city. Everybody, they have fields all over out here, everywhere. They have got fields all over the place. They go out to their fields and they work their fields in the daytime, and at nighttime they go back in the city because it's safe. Okay? Nobody lives out here. Nobody lives out in their fields. They travel to their fields. And they bring produce home every day and whatever. How many of you knew that? Anybody know that? How many of you didn't know it? Anybody? All right. All the time they lived in a walled city. And the gates were shut at night. Okay, you couldn't get in there at night. But the shepherds now, the shepherds risked their lives every night because they didn't go into the cities. They stayed out in the fields with the sheep. They laid down their lives for their sheep. Now they're out here. Everybody else is safe in here at home, in their beds. The shepherd is outside. He's out there with the sheep. And guess what's out there with the sheep? What's out there? They don't bring the sheep in every night into the city. There's wolves and there's bears and lions. Coyotes. Foxes. So, out away from the city, out here in the fields, right in the pasture land, every night they had a walled little corral. This is what we call a sheepfold, a corral. Now they had one door to the sheepfold. And the shepherd would herd his sheep up, and he would take them and put them in that corral every night. Okay? And guess where the shepherd would sleep?
Right there with
He laid right down in the doorway. And over the walls here, now these are usually rock walls, but on the rock walls, you know what they'd plant? On the rock walls, they didn't have barbed wire, or what we call concentration, what's that wire?
Constantine wire.
What?
Constantine.
Concertina wire.
Yeah. They didn't have that back then. But they would plant briar bushes, thorns over the edge of the wall, so somebody couldn't climb in. The animals would get stuck if anybody tried to come in there. Now let's look back and see what Jesus is talking about. All right? Now here the shepherd is laying in the door. That's where he sleeps. Right here is the door. The shepherd lays his body right down there. If anybody goes into that sheepfold, in that corral, he's going to go over his dead body. Okay? He's going to have to fight him in there. And what does the shepherd have there at the door? What does he have?
Staff.
He's got a staff.
A dog.
He's got a dog sometimes. He has a staff like this, like a chicken catcher. Ever had a chicken catcher? You grab a chicken by the foot. That's how you catch him. Back then, this shepherd's staff, it was a staff. It's not a rod. Now, this is a staff. He had actually 3 implements. He had this staff, which he caught him by the sheep and drug him back home, and sometimes he'd catch him by the leg like that, and with his rod, he'd beat the tar out of him. Give him a whooping. Now, you get over here and get in line now. The sheep got a whipping. All right, now, has the Lord ever give you a whooping? Grabbed you by the foot and whooped you just a little bit? Yeah. So he had a staff and he had a rod, and then David had a slingshot, didn't he? All right, a slingshot. Let's go back and make it alive. Okay, let's see what's going on here. But he who enters by the door is what? The shepherd of the sheep. He's the shepherd of the sheep. Marilyn, that thing is making an awful lot of noise back there. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice. Now, the sheep hear the shepherd's voice, and they know his voice. Okay? Back there in Psalm 23. Let's go back there again and look at that for just a moment. We got started. All of these will make more sense to you than ever before, I hope. Psalm 23. The Lord is my roe, shepherd. He's going to seize after me. I shall not want. Remember back there in Ezeckiel, the 34th chapter, he said, the sheep were hungry. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pasture. He takes me out there in the heat of the day. I lie down in green pastures where I have plenty to eat. He leads me beside quiet waters or still waters. You know that a sheep will not drink from running water. They will not. You can't take a sheep up to a creek. He's not going to drink in that creek. I remember what was his name?
Alex?
No, not...
Henry?
No, the Lopez up there at Cajon Ranch, the foreman for 100 years almost. Don, Jose, Maria, Don, Lopez, I think was his name. He had a whole line of names, all right? But he one time, they hired him to take sheep all the way to Wyoming, Green River, Wyoming. And every place he went, he had to find some place for the sheep to drink still water, because they're not going to drink out of a river. They'd have to go get buckets and figure out a basin in the ground and take water over there and carry the water from the running water so the sheep would go up. They're afraid of running water. They're afraid of running water. How many of you knew that? Am I? Well, they're afraid of running water. He got all the way up there into Owens Valley. He went up Owens Valley, and the Cajon Ranch sent a guy up there that was a con artist, and they told him he knew the way. And they got out there, went through Fish Lake Valley, where I used to live. Then they went up over Lida Pass and got out there in the desert, over there by Goldfield out there, and the sheep got scattered. And there was this guy, he said that he knew where water was. Well, it was running water. The sheep would starve. They would die of thirst before they'd ever drink from running water. He had to take them all the way back over Lida and down in the Fish Lake Valley and feed them and let them drink in the still waters. before he could go on further, and then he went out the north end of the valley. Better turn that thing over. This one here's the manual. Quiet, still water, so I won't be afraid. I can drink. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness. Now, that's what the Lord does to us, see. For His name's sake. For His name. You know why you do what you do? Why do you live the life you live? For the sake of the Lord. Israel, God, remember in Ezeckiel, says, God says, I am going to whip the tar out of you. I am going to beat the way out of you. Because of my name's sake. You will not go out there and blaspheme my name among the ungodly and get by with it. I'm going to work you over. Because they will know that I'm mad at you. Not only that, but he said, I'm going to bring you back home. Not because you did anything good, but I'm going to bring you home because I love you. And I said I would. Right over there, look at Ezeckiel. Right there, the dispersion, Ezekkiel 36, 16 through 19. And look at this one. See here? You can just follow this chart. Ezekkiel 36, 20 through 24. The regathering of Israel. Why did he disperse them? For His name's sake. Why did he gather them? For His name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. The shadows, in the shadows is where you're afraid, isn't it? In the darkness. I will feel no evil, for you're with me. Even though the sheep are out there in the open, basically out away from the cities, where's He? Laying in the door. His life is laid on the line. I will feel no evil, for you're with me. David looks at Jehovah as if He's his shepherd. And this is what heaven's going to be like. That mansion over the hilltop. Oh, I like that today. That mansion over the hilltop. I heard a joke about a guy that he was a very greedy man. And the Lord finally let him into heaven. But he wanted to bring something with him. And he just absolutely had a whole suitcase. He said, I can't go without my suitcase. Can't go without my suitcase. And in that suitcase, when he got up to St. Peter's Gate, of course it's all fictional, you know. But he got up there and he said, what you got in the box, boy? He opened it up and gold bricks. He said, why'd you bring all that paving material with you? We got plenty. He loved his gold. They're going to be walking on gold in that city, just that mansion just over the hilltop. That's going to be paving material. Stuff you walk on. But Floyd, it'd be nice, won't it?
Oh, yeah.
I feel no evil, for you're with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Your rod and your staff. The rod kind of whips me in line every night. And also, the staff also jerks me out of danger. Right out of the lion's jaws sometimes. You have prepared a table before me in the very face of my enemies. Right out there in the pastures where the wild wolves are, and the bears, and the lions. David said he killed a bear one time, didn't he? And he killed a lion. He was a type of Jehovah. The way we are in this world. You know, sometimes when we get to thinking about all of our aches and ailments and everything else, I tell you what, I got so many of them coming on me, I just don't know which one's going to be next. I told my wife, and I said, well, I'll be here until the Lord's finished with me. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. You know what you're supposed to be doing? Prepare a table. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. You're going to have enough. Surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And go back to John, the 10th chapter now. Don't this make sense better when you look at it like this? Does it open up? But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep, and to him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he puts forth all his own, he goes before them. Now he's going to lead the sheep. And the sheep follow him because they know his voice. Lopez wrote in his memoirs that the shepherd took dogs, and the dogs knew the sheep. And the dogs would risk their lives for the sheep. And when they took the sheep, like they took the sheep and all the way to Wyoming up there, he had a dog that saved his life on the way. What was the name of that dog? Marilyn, do you remember the name of that dog? I can't remember the name of the dog, but the dog would go out there, would be up at Fort Tejon, and the dog would go out and gather the sheep. One time she had pups. She had like 6 pups, and she'd take off and go gather the sheep. She loved those sheep. She was raised with those sheep, and they were as important to her as her pups. And her pups would be crying for her, and here she'd come back. And she'd go off. And one time the dog was gone for 2 days. And they went out there and found, and one of the ewes had lambs. And that dog was out there guarding because there were coyotes out there, and she'd killed 2 or 3 coyotes. And was risking her life for the sheep. And when they take off and they go all the way up there to Green River, Wyoming, like he did, when they sold the sheep, the dog went with him. He said, I hated to walk off and leave that dog. He said, that dog had saved my life, but the dog went with the sheep.
The horse did too.
Yeah, the horse did too.
Hey, Brother Jim,
And
we had this one church I was a member of. The pastor said, he said, I'm not really the shepherd of this flock. He said, I'm the sheepdog.
yeah,
I have to run around and get the members to come in and
Yeah.
keep them in
the
line.
sheepdog. And a stranger they will simply not follow, but will flee from him, because they do not know the voice of strangers. And then he said in verse 6, this is a figure of speech. This is a parable, he says. Jesus spoke to them, but they did not understand what those things were which he had been saying to them. And Jesus said to them again, truly I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. All who come before me are what? Thieves and robbers. But the sheep did not hear them. You know what? In Israel, there were very few people. We have an example of a few people that were real, true believers in Jesus' time. Name some of them for me. Come on, let's look back. In the temple where Jesus, when he was circumcised, there were 2 people there, weren't there?
Nicodemus and
No.
Ananias.
What?
Ananias.
Ananias
And
and Anna. He said after he saw Jesus, he said, I have seen the Messiah, now Lord, let me die. And the woman had given her life in service of the temple, and she was serving rats, by the way. They were a bunch of skunks, but she had given her life because she loved the Lord. You know, when you give your money to the Lord and when you give your life to the Lord, don't worry about everybody around you, just worry about the Lord. I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he shall be saved and shall go in and out and find pasture. There was a little old girl. All of Israel, from Genesis, the 3rd chapter and verse 15, they believed that a woman would bring forth the Messiah. And every Jewish girl thought maybe she was the one. But there was one. And her name was Mary. Now what does Mary mean?
Bitter.
Bitter. Bitter.
Mara.
Bitter Mara. Yeah. Bitter. Her name was Mary. But the Lord used her, didn't he?
Yeah.
Mary?
Yeah. The Lord used her to bring forth the Messiah. He used her. She was a faithful woman. She kept herself for the Lord, even though she was engaged to be married. Married. All right. And I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he shall be saved and shall go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to what? To steal. And to kill and to destroy. I come that they might have life, and might have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Until you see this, and you see the picture of what he's talking about, the shepherd stayed out in the fields with the sheep. If they were out in pastures, he laid right around. He was going around constantly all night long. He'd get up and go around. If they were out in the open. If they were in a sheepfold, he was laying in the door. All the time. He said, he who is a hireling and not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep, but beholds the wolf coming. And he leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. And he flees because he is a hireling. He is not concerned about the sheep. Think about that. How many times that is in the world today. I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own know me. Even as the Father knows me, I know the Father, and I lay down my life for my sheep. And here we are in verse number 16. Anybody over there? Verse number 16. Are you there,
Yeah.
Sunshine?
I have, okay, sorry. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd.
All right. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it up again. And no one has taken it from me, but I lay down on my own initiative. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This commandment I received from my Father. Now, you know that they didn't kill Jesus. They didn't kill him. Jesus should have died before he ever got to the cross. If any of you saw that movie, The Passion, I mean, there was a lot of baloney in that movie, but I'm going to tell you something else that was realistic was when Jesus was beat. Pontius Pilate tried to turn him loose. 5 times he declared him to be innocent. He did everything he could do to turn Jesus loose. Because he believed who he was. He believed it. He had protected him for years, according to ancient writings. He had protected him for years. He had met with him. He even warned Jesus to take it a little easy on those rats. The rats, all right, but take it a little easy. He said, they're going to try to, we're going to have an insurrection. We're going to have a civil war here if you don't do something different. He said, I'll protect you no matter what happens. He said, no, he said, you won't. You can't do it. And then, if you read in the Arco volume, if you read Pontius Pilate's letters to Caesar, you'll read what he saw that night. He said that whole praetorium, the whole palace, he said those Jews came there and they stomped their feet and they screamed, crucify him, crucify him. He said the ground was shaking. I thought the building was going to fall down. Crying for his blood. And he beat him so bad that he thought, well, you know what, when people see, I don't care how bad your enemy is or how mean he is, when you see him hurt and dying, you'll say, oh, well, that's enough. So he had him beat to the point where he should have died. And he said, here he is. Can I turn him loose? Can I give you Barabbas, son of the Father? That's what his name meant. And he was a killer and a murderer. He was probably the person, when Jesus told the story about the Good Samaritan, that Good Samaritan picked up a person that was beat on the side of the road and left for dead. These rats, we have 2 people with Barabbas that were killers and murderers. They were murderers. These weren't just thieves. It says in King James, 2 thieves on the cross. One on his right and one on his left. That word is not thieves. It's murderers. It's murderers. They were murderers. They killed people. They left children and mothers and husbands by the side of the road, dead and dying, and couldn't care anything about it. These were the guy. And Pontius Pilate says, do you want me to turn him loose back on you again? Do you want me to turn him back on you, Barabbas, or do you want Jesus? And of course, what would you say, Brother Bill? What would you have said if you know, they knew who Barabbas was. He's a murderer.
I said, give me Jesus.
Yeah. I would have said, don't turn Barabbas back loose on us. Enough people have been killed by him already, but they said, give us Barabbas. And he said, and then Pontius Pilate washed his hands, remember? Right in their face. And what did his washing his hands mean?
He was
I am innocent. I've washed my hands of this thing. That's where the word, I washed my hands of this.
But you
And he
can't
said,
do that.
his blood is upon you. And then what did they say? let his blood be upon us and what?
Our children.
And our children. And guess what? It was. Oh, and it was. Ezeckiel 34 now. Go back to Ezekkiel 34 for a few more minutes. And the sheep scattered for a lack of a shepherd, and they became food for every beast of the field where they were scattered. And my flock wandered through all the mountains and on every high hill, and my flock was scattered all over the surface of the earth. That's the dispersion. And there was no one to search and seek for them, and therefore you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As I live, declares the Lord God, surely because my flock has become prey, my flock has even become food for all the beasts of the field, for lack of a shepherd, and my shepherds did not search for my flock, but rather the shepherds fed themselves and did not feed the flock. You go back to Jesus' time. And it's kind of like that today, so many times in the religious world today. And people have this idea. If you're doing God's will, you're going to be rich. That's what we call the prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
If you're doing God's will, you're going to be rich.
But you really are. It's not money making.
Yeah.
Right.
When we get to walk on those streets that are paved with gold.
Amen.
My
one
man,
day.
just over the hillside.
But how much is that going on? That's what Jim Baker was talking about, wasn't it? Joel Osteen. This is what we call the prosperity gospel. It makes you feel real good. Makes you feel real good. They do. They'll preach a message and make you just feel like you're just wonderful and God's going to bless you. They say, go out and buy a car. Don't drive that old rattle trap that you're driving around. Go out there and buy you a car. And when you go buy you a car, you go down there and get you a Mercedes-Benz. You go get yourself a Cadillac.
SL 500.
Yeah.
And if you buy a Mercedes, don't buy a 180. Buy a 900.
Best there is.
The top of the line. And God is going to bless you because you're doing His will. I got news for you. There's a lot of poor people in this world. And the Lord said in His ministry, He said it's easier for a rich man or for a camel to go through the eye of a sewing needle. And He said sewing needle. Matter of fact, He said a surgical needle. That was a small needle that had a small eye in it, and back in those days, they took horsehair or catgut, and they put on, and they would suture them in time. Brother?
He also said that the poor will always be with you.
That's right. The poor will always be with us. And you know what? If you go in the world, I want you to, if you ever had a chance to go out into like third world countries, and of course America is almost a third world country now, but if you go out in these third world countries, some of the Christian people that are there are happy as if they had good sense, just singing up a storm and having a ball. And I so appreciate, Brother Ted, the music you brought with us in ministry this morning. It's wonderful. Get your mind set for the Lord, doesn't it?
Amen.
They're happy. They'll stay in church all day long. We're too busy. We want to get home and watch television or something. Or go out to dinner or something. Those people sit there and they pray and sing all day long. I remember the Solomon Islands. Neil Morley. Remember Brother Morley? He just passed away a year or so ago. One of my real good friends. A lot of people go out and they start missions. Brother Morley said, I don't start missions, I start churches. That's the scriptural way to do it. Missions, you know, they always want somebody to give to them. If you say you're a mission, then everybody's going to give to you. But if you say you're a church, well, that's all right. The church will take care of itself. They went down and started churches. And they were so hungry for the Word of God, I think he started like 180 churches in the Solomon Islands. About 10 years ago, they contacted me and wanted me to go to China. I'm a long-winded preacher, you know. On Wednesday night, I teach for an hour and a half usually. And on Sunday morning, sometimes an hour and 15 minutes or something like that. There aren't very many preachers preach that much anymore. But they listened to me and they heard my preaching and everything, and they said, we want you in China. Those people want somebody to go down there and will preach 24 hours to 48 hours in a row. Well, they had a lot of confidence in me.
Yeah, you'll be tired by the 12th hour, Jim.
Yeah. I remember when I could go down there and preach 5 hours in the seminary and come home and preach at night when I was young. But boy, you know. But now, in 1 month, in China, they downloaded 1,582 hours of messages off of my websites in 1 month. 1,582. I was there. I was there. Hear the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord God, behold, I am against the shepherds. I shall demand my sheep from them and make them cease from feeding my sheep, so that the shepherds will not feed themselves any more, but I shall deliver my flock from their mouth, that they may not be food for them. For thus saith the Lord God, behold, I myself will search for my sheep. Isn't that what Jesus did? He went after his sheep. And as a shepherd cares for his herd in the day when he is among his scattered sheep, so will I care for my sheep, and will deliver them from all the places where they were scattered on a cloudy and a gloomy day. Now look at that. Remember in the book of Proverbs it says, and the sluggard says what? I won't go out and sow my fields today because it's cloudy. It might rain. He said, I'm going to go out in hard times. I'm going to go out in the middle of a storm and search for my sheep. I'm going to go out in the middle of the storm. I remember one time up in Nevada, when I lived up in Nevada in Fish Lake Valley, we went out and gathered up a bunch of cows that got out. And my old stepdad, he was a world-class criminal, but I tell you what, it was something else to be around that guy. He was handy about everything. We went out there and got those sheep, we drove them in, and he was out there singing Ghost Riders in the Sky. And we were out there, and I mean the sky was lit up with lightning and everything else. I will hear his voice across that sagebrush out there. You could hear him for 5 miles singing at the top of his voice, Ghost Riders in the Sky. As we gathered those, and I saw the lightning and everything. Jesus said, I'll go out there in the middle of a storm like that and I'll gather my sheep. Boy, on the cross of Calvary, it turned dark, didn't it? It turned dark. I will bring out from among the people and gather them from the countries and bring them to their own land. And I will feed them on the mountains of Israel by the streams and all the inhabited places of the land. I will feed them in good pasture, and their grazing ground will be on the mountain heights of Israel. And there they will lie down in good grazing pasture, and they will feed in rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. And I will feed my flock, and I will lead them to rest, declares the Lord. And I will seek the lost and bring them back, the scattered, bind up the broken and strengthen the sick, but the fat and the strong I will destroy, and I will feed them with judgment. Well, that's a pretty good chapter in the book of Ezekiel. Did you know it was there? Isn't that a beautiful chapter? And it's not the only place that story is in the Bible. It's in Psalm 23 and John the 10th chapter too. Thank you for putting up with me today.
Amen.
Brother, thank you for coming today too, Brother Floyd. I really enjoy having you in here. And Ted, thank you for being here. And remember, Brother Parker.
No, I got the message right here.
You got all up there? You're going to come up
I
here?
need the cards back.
Okay, give her back to the church.
You know what? We got them on here, and we couldn't hear what we were supposed to do with them.
Here, I got the thing right here, Dave.
You're supposed to say something, and then they're gonna send it to him.
Oh, all right.
Okay,
Okay, come up here,
No,
brother.
I have the instructions right here. That's what it is. All right, so Brandon has sent us a message for Pastor Robert Park. He has